Let me ask you something. When was the last time you bought a new brand game and thought, yeah, that was actually worth it? Not just the game itself, but whole experience, the price, the content, what you actually got for your money. Because here's what's been happening. In 2005, you paid $60 for a game. In 2020, that jumped to $70. And now, in 2026, we got Nintendo charging $80 for Mario Kart, Microsoft trying to push $80 for Outer Wars 2, and yet somehow, the games releasing at those prices are often broke at launch, stuffed with microtransactions, and abandoned with a year. So what exactly are you paying for? Today we're going to break that down, where the prices actually came from, who's responsible, and whether any of this makes sense. Let's start at the beginning. Back in the early 2000s, most big console games cost around $40 to $50. Then in November 2005, Call of Duty 2 launched alongside an Xbox at $60. And that became the new standard overnight. There was some pushback at the time, sure, but the games generally looked and played better than anything before. The jump felt justified. You could see where the money went. Then came PS4 and Xbox One era. Development budgets exploded. In 2010, big budget games cost around $30 million to make. By 2014, that number hit $68 million. And by 2020, we're talking about hundreds of millions. So in 2020, 2K became the first publisher to officially push price to $70, using NBA 2K21 as a test project. And people were furious. But they still bought it. So the rest of the industry just fell off. Now here's where it gets interesting, because the publishers have already made excuses for all of this. They say games are more expensive to make than ever, so prices have to go up. And honestly, that part is actually true. Development costs are generally massive right now. But there's a problem with that argument. NBA 2K21 was one of the first $70 games. Wanna know what was different about it compared to the $60 version from the 1 year before? Almost nothing. The multiplayer servers got shut down, the digital version got delisted, and you literally cannot play it anymore. A $70 game completely gone. That's not a high quality experience, that's just a higher price. So, if it's not purely bad development costs, what else is driving this? 3 things. Inflation, corporate greed, and business model that no longer cares about you keeping the game. Inflation is the one publishers love to bring up. And fine, it's real. If you adjust $60 game from 2005 for inflation, it's worth roughly $90 today. So technically, $70 is actually cheaper than what we were paying before. That argument checks out mathematically. But here's what that argument ignores. Gaming industry has also exploded in size. There are more players than ever, more markets, more revenue. The industry brings in hundreds of the billions of dollars in a year. When your audience grows that massively and your revenue keeps hitting a record high, the inflation excuse starts to sound a lot less convincing. Because if games need to cost more because they're expensive to make, why are CEOs pocketing 8-figure bonuses the same day they announce a layoff? Two CEO got $25 million performance bonus and laid off 600 developers in the same announcement. That's not a company struggling to survive. That's a company choosing where to put the money. And there is a microtransaction problem, which honestly make the base price conversation almost irrelevant at this point. You pay $60. Great. Now you also had the Battle Pass, the Season Pass, and Deluxe Edition to get the content that should have been in the base game, and the premium currency to unlock cosmetics, and maybe subscription service on top of that. Call of Duty is a perfect example. You pay full price for the game, and you immediately hit with ad for the Battle Pass, limited time bundles, and exclusive cosmetics that cost more than game itself. They actually got caught testing in-game advertisement inside a weapon select menu. In a $60 game with a separate Battle Pass already in it. Response was the usual pure spec. It was tests that went live by accident. But there's the thing. Someone built that system, someone designed those ads, wrote them into the menu, and run the test. That doesn't happen by accident. That's a roadmap. Now, let's talk about the games that are somehow going the other direction. Because while of this happening at the top end of the industry, something else is going quietly underneath it. Games like Hollow Knight sold 15 and gave players 40 or more hours of polished content. Hades 2, Slide of Spiritus, Schedule 1, those are games that cost a fraction of the triple titles and are completely dominating conversation. The data is pretty striking. The average price of the best-selling games our platform has actually been dropping. More games are selling at lower price points. And the revenue numbers are still holding up, which tells you that people aren't spending less money on the game overall. They're just spending in things that they feel worth it. The consumers are voting for their wallets. They're saying that $60 for a broken open world game with 400 side quests they'll never finish isn't a good deal. But $20 for something tight, focused, and genuinely fun, they'll buy it all the day. And the big publishers are watching it happening and still not learning a lesson. There's also a hardware side to this conversation that doesn't get talked enough. It's not just the games getting more expensive, consoles are too. Xbox just raised price across their entire hardware lineup. The Series X now costs $600. That's the same price the PS3 launched at 2006, which everyone called disaster at the time. And the argument back then was that $600 was too much. People couldn't afford it. It hurt PlayStation badly in early going. They had to cut the price to stay competitive. But now those companies aren't cutting price. The consoles don't get price downs anymore. The Switch never got through its entire lifespan. PlayStation has only gone up in most markets, and now Microsoft is adding another layer on top of that. So you're looking at a future where the hardware costs $600, the games are cost $80, the online subscription costs around $60 a year, and half of the content in those games is locked behind additional purchases. That's a very expensive hobby. For a lot of people, it's becoming one they cannot afford. Here's the part that actually worries me. The gaming built itself on accessibility. It was always more affordable than going to a concert or a movie every weekend. You could drop a $60 on a game and get hundreds of hours out of it. The value proposition was real. It kept people engaged. It kept industry growing. But if you start pushing the price in the territory where only high-income households can completely participate, you're not just pricing out some customers, you're shrinking your future outing. The teenagers who cannot afford those games right now are the adults who would have been buying your games for the next 30 years. If you price them out early, they find other hobbies. They move to mobile, they move to free-to-play, to just stop caring about your platform earlier. And the data is already showing this. The 18 to 25 age group in US is spending nearly 25% less on gaming this year. Console hardware sales have peaked, but the market isn't growing the way it used to. But instead of responding that by offering more value, the industry response has been raise price and hope the hardcore fans absorb the cost. That's not a growth strategy. That's a slow decline. So what's the actual fix? Honestly, some publishers are already figuring out, even it's so rare. Expedition 33 launched at $50 and blew everyone away. Not because it was cheap, but because the price matched the experience. Hollow Knight Silksong launched at $20 and sold nearly 5 million copies in a couple of weeks. That's a model that works. Scope your game properly, price it honestly, and deliver something that feels complete. You don't need 200 hours of content and $100 price tag. You need a game that respects players' time and money. Capcom is probably the best current example of the major studios actually going to do this. They released 3 games in the first few months of 2026, all of them were hits, and none of them needed to be bloated live service platform to succeed. They just made a focused quality games at reasonable prices and trust their audience would show up. And their audience did. Here's the bottom line. Game prices are going up. That's not going away. But the reason they're going up isn't because making games is much more harder. It's because the industry figured out that most dedicated players will pay almost anything, and they decide to optimize for that rather than for everyone else. The answer isn't just accept it, it's be selective. Support the games and companies that actually earn you money. Let the ones that don't figure out the hard way that players are paying attention. Because at the end of the day, the only thing that actually changes pricing behavior is whether or not people buy the product. Microsoft dropped Outer Worlds 2 back down from the $80 when the pre-orders didn't came in. That's what works. Vote with your wallets and maybe stop pre-ordering things. See you in the next one.